First, we would like to acknowledge and pay our deep respect to all the indigenous speaking tribes and people of New Mexico, their elders and ancestors, past, present, and future. We acknowledge and offer deep gratitude to this native land, the water that supports us, and the four directions. As we've gathered here right now together, we invite you to join us in that acknowledgement, that respect, and that gratitude. Storytellers of New Mexico is committed to supporting Black Lives Matter and to uplifting the voices of those who may not always be heard. To this end, Stories at a Distance is committed to featuring social justice stories and themes to the extent possible. We are also committed to providing a non-discriminatory and welcoming environment for all. STN, Storytellers of New Mexico, provide guidelines to the tellers, but we do not dictate story choices. The storyteller, whatever story they choose to tell, we allow them to do that. We are committed to cultivating an inclusive storytelling experience for all. Tonight's program is an example of this commitment with the theme, so what are you gonna do about it? So let's hear from tonight's producer, Eldrina Damon, what led her to select this theme. Please help me welcome Eldrina.
Thank you. My English name is Eldrina. My Tewa name is Ku'Lutsawe. I come from the Pueblo people of the Laguna, Tewa, and Hopi. And when I was researching for a project, a water project, I came across a woman that I'm going to be speaking to you about tonight. Her story was fantastic. 10, 15 minutes can do no justice to what she accomplished. But while I was researching about her and hearing all sorts of things that people were writing about, one of the things that I kind of stood out in her talking was that there are times in life when we come to a place where we're going to be asked to do something and we have a choice to make. Either we can stand there and wait for somebody else to do it and join in, or we can go ahead and get it done ourselves. And that was her situation. And you'll hear more about it because she was asked, so what are you going to do about it? So tonight, we're going to be hearing from tellers that have done something about it. And so I thank you for this time, and getting back to you, Juba. Thank you.
Thank you, Eldrina. I can hardly wait to hear the stories. So here's what to expect. We'll have 3 featured presenters, up to 4 open micers with 5-minute stories on our theme. At this point, I'd like to turn the mic over to Eldrina Damon, tonight's producer.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Juba. I'm going to introduce our first tellers, Jan Womavoya and her mother, Geneva. Jan is going to be joined by her mother, and Geneva is 94 years young. Geneva was a registered nurse for over 40 years. She's the only fluent Comanche language speaker in New Mexico, and she has been teaching for over 30 years. Jan Womavoya is the youngest daughter of Geneva Navarro. Jan has been working with her mother since 1995 to revitalize the Comanche language. Jan has a master's degree in teaching. Her other passion, besides Comanche language, is teaching speech communication. The charity that they wanted to suggest and bring to attention is called Comanche Language and Culture Preservation Committee. And you will have that information in the chat. So help me to welcome our first tellers, Jan and Geneva. Thank you.
Maraweka, Nananhiata, Na Supeti, Jan Wamavoya, Data Naitana, Nanat Namana Ta Tuinapa, Dus Naviquean.
Maraweka, Nananhiata, Geneva, Navarro, Buhayeta, Apache Naitana, Na Natnamanata, Duinapa, Deas Naviqueana.
In our Comanche language, we introduced ourselves as we actually are teaching our students in our class, and Mom's Comanche name, Buhayatsa, means waking to medicine. And she gave herself that name because she didn't have a Comanche name, and it means waking to medicine because she was a nurse for so long. And my Comanche name, Nasupeti, means dependable. It was given to me by my Aunt Lois Patapony, and she wanted me to have her name. So it's kind of a hard name to live up to, but I'm trying. So what we're talking about today pertaining to what are we going to do about it is our language and language loss, literally, in many tribes across the world and across the United States. So I'm going to try to use my little PowerPoint here to help me out. The problem is that we are on the verge of losing our Comanche language, just like many other tribes are. And so I'm hoping that giving you a little bit of insight on our language will help you understand what other tribes may be going through also. Some of the causes are, of course, manifest destiny, kill the Indian, save the man, racism, assimilation. We are bombarded with English every single day throughout all types of media. And I find myself, instead of listening to my language, which we record, I will turn on the radio, and then that reminds me, hey, you need to listen to your language. So I try to do that daily as we just go through our lives, and I talk to my mom as we go through our daily lives. And I've learned quite a bit because now I'm her caretaker, and I'm being able to stay home with her all the time helped me to learn a little bit better, a little bit more as we go. There are approximately, and I would say that's even questionable, 20 Comanche speakers alive still today, and we've lost at least 20 over the past 20 years or so. And you know, they were all part of the program that Mom was involved with to help save the language. There are also very few teachers that are actually teaching. So Mom is one of the only teachers that teaches daily. We have classes 4 days a week, and we even have a class for parents and children. So I'm hoping to get more people involved, because the children are the ones that really learn it, and they are quick learners. I know they learn them learn the language quicker than I do. and I'm in my I'm actually a year away from 60, so it's been very hard for me to learn the language. Before we really talk about the solutions, some of the solutions we have, I'd like to talk about our tribal backgrounds. We are from the Comanche Nation, the Quahara, the Antelope Band, and the Penana, the Wasp Band. We are descendants from Kobe, Chief Wild Horse. That's Geneva's great-great-grandfather. He was a prisoner of war at Fort Sill, Oklahoma in the late 1800s. He actually, many of you may know, or some of you may know, of Quanah Parker. He was basically, he took Quanah Parker under his wing and taught him how to become a leader. And he fought in the Border, Texas, they call it the war. It was basically the Comanches and other tribes were trying to prevent the white people from killing off all the buffalo. And they were basically just having target practice with our food. And so we went to war with them. And unfortunately, we lost because they did kill off a lot of our buffalo, which also helped the people to round us up and give us a long walk like the Cherokees, not as far, but we had to walk from the Texas area, all over the Texas area to Oklahoma, like almost south mid Oklahoma in Anadarko, Oklahoma. That's where we ended up at first. And then we ended up back at Fort Sill and became prisoners of war. So it was not, I'm sure, a very good time for our people. I'd like to talk a little bit about Geneva's grandparents. Mukama and Thuinap was his name. That was his only name. This on your left side of your screen is their wedding picture, and this other one is later years. I think that was taken at the carnival in one of the photo booths. That's what I was told. So Frank was given that name because they couldn't pronounce Thuinap, and literally they called him Frank Tate. So that we are relatives to the Tates, and the people, I don't know, some people may know Navaquea. Doc Navaquea made his name famous through his artwork, and literally those there's the same relation where because Navaquea was his name, they changed his name to Navaquea, literally. But Frank ended up going to a boarding school at Anadarko, Oklahoma, called Riverside Indian School. And his parents said, okay, they let him take him. And he was a young man. I'm not really sure how old he was, but when he got there, they ended up cutting his hair, and everybody's hair. I guess they were afraid everybody was going to get bugs, and that was one of the reasons they cut their hair, for cleanliness, literally. So when you cut your hair in Comanche, in the Comanche culture, it means that somebody died. So he was so upset that he left, and he went clear home from where he was. And he got home and he asked his father, who died? And he said, no one. And he said, well, they cut my hair and I don't want to go back there. So his father told him, okay, you don't have to go back. And I don't know where he learned it, but he became a farmer. He became a farmer, and he raised all kinds of crops and chickens and horses. He was a very good horseman. and his wife became his partner, and they worked together, raising many children and adopted children and their grandchildren. In fact, they raised mom pretty much when she was between 5 and 7 years old. And mom's grandma, Mukama, never went to school because her sisters told her that if you go to school, you're going to have to get a punishment for not knowing how to speak English. And later on in her years, she never learned how to speak, and she was sorry that she didn't take the punishment and learn how to speak English because she couldn't understand and she never learned how to speak. And Frank learned a few words. A few of his words in English were, he knew money, he understood money, and actually his wife Mukama learned money too, and she learned how to play cards. So she was one of those card sharks. She loved to gamble. But Frank knew money, and when he'd get mad and they'd hear him start talking English, one of the things that he would say was, "Damn hell." Those were some of the only English words that he actually knew and would say. Geneva's mother, my kaku, Esther Marcella Tuinapa, ended up going to boarding schools with the siblings, her siblings, and her father only let her go because it was a Catholic boarding school. He didn't want any of his kids to go to the government boarding schools because of how he was treated. So he thought that letting them go to a Catholic school at St. Patrick's in Anadarko, Oklahoma would be okay. And I don't have a picture of him, but her brother, James, ended up being punished. He was just little. He was about 5 years old, and he went to the boarding school, and he ended up telling mom later. He would come over and he'd be just sad and be drinking, and he would tell her, Geneva, Jeannie, my hand still hurts right here where the sister hit me with the ruler for speaking my language. So if you can imagine, if you know a 5-year-old or had children, how that could probably affect someone for the rest of their life. And it was hard to tell that story for a while. Now I just get mad. I used to just burst into tears when I would tell that story to my speech class when I would do my introduction. But they had people that were affected that way also. This is a picture of Geneva and her kaku, her grandmother. And again, she became the interpreter for her grandparents because they couldn't speak English very well. And her grandmother, I thought, oh, I wish you could have saved it. She used to make a grocery list with pictures. She would draw the salt, the container of salt, and that's why I wish I could see how she drew. But I could just picture it in my mind. And Mom would go to the BIA with her grandfather, and she would bargain for whatever kind of money he was asking for. Sometimes they would just tell him, this is how much you're going to get. And she would tell him. And like I said, he knew money. So he was like, that's not enough. I need this amount. So she would tell them and make sure that he got what he needed from the BIA whenever he was going to get some money if he needed some. And another thing, she used to read to them her history book, and she would read to them, and he would say, who wrote that? That's a bunch of lies. Tear that page out. And she was afraid of her teacher, so she said, I didn't dare tear my page out. because her grandpa would get so mad at all the lies that were in the book, that history book that she brought home. So one of the things I wanted to talk about was how, what our language means to us. And I wanted to ask my mom, so what does our language mean to you?
It means everything. Our language means everything to me because I can say anything in our language and plus interpret it. I know our language very well, and I can interpret whatever I want to say in our language.
And I wanted to say a little bit about what it means to me. It means us as a people. It's part of us. It's our culture. It's our spirit. And it would be a shame if it died. So anybody that's learning a language, if you want to learn it, just do it now. You know, what are you going to do about it? That's one of the things that when Drina told me this, I was like, yeah, we can do this, because that's exactly what we're doing. And that's, you know, we'll do this for as long as Mom is interested in teaching it. So, and you know, sometimes she gets tired, and that's okay, because we're actually going to take a break from it for a couple of weeks. So we're hoping to get back together with our group in a little while. So once we do that, we'll get started and get involved with it. With language preservation, we're working with the Comanche Language Department. Whoops, sorry. We're working with the Comanche Language Department with Dr. Catherine Briner. And literally, she is an angel, I think, that the Creator has sent to us to help us with our language teaching, and she is just wonderful. She is the director of the language planning and development for Comanche Nation language. And she is actually now she's working on a PhD in comparative studies that focuses on linguistics and cultural rhetoric, and basically how our language can be approached using a Comanche lens at Florida Atlantic University. And she also has a doctorate in music performance from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro for her dissertation. She recreated the history of the French horn in America. So this lady has 2 PhDs. She's awesome, and we enjoy working with her. So literally, what we're doing about it is just we're doing it. And we wanted to real quick before closing say our motto, and we'll explain it briefly here. Savesa namana sama oyet namani wana et akitsi nanatasa namani wan hutui uvni tutasa namani wan hutui. I just want to say Ada, thank you, and Subat Sama, the end. Thank you for listening.
Our next feature teller comes from the state of Texas. Her name is Pegyarney. Peggy is a full-blooded American Indian and a citizen of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. She's the founder of a state bill designating the last Friday in September as American Indian Heritage Day in Texas. She's the founder of 2 nonprofit organizations, American Indian Heritage Day in Texas and Indian Citizens Against Racial Exploitation. And it is a well-known cultural educator as well as a cultural presenter and consultant. Peggy has over 30 years of experience in community service, arts and education, advocacy, and mentoring. She's a civic leader, marketing professional, and small business owner in the Dallas, Texas area. She has always been involved in grassroots activities for American Indians and served as a director of the Dallas ISD American Indian Education Program. Currently, she is a cohort to a national Dallas Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation Initiative. Please help me welcome Pegyarney. Thank you.
Alitu, Chuma Chukma. Hello, how are you from my tribal language? I'm a full-blood American Indian, and I'm a citizen of the Choctaw Nation from Oklahoma, but I have lived in the Dallas, Texas area since the early 1960s. Back in 2011 on Columbus Day, I wrote a post on Facebook that said it is inappropriate for American Indian children to celebrate a day honoring a person for discovering a nation of people. I received a call from a friend next day, Susan Myers, from the Southwest Jewish Congress. She asked if I had thought about developing a bill to present to the upcoming Texas legislation. I said no, and she said, well, why don't we work on it? And I said, well, oh my gosh, I haven't done anything like this. All of my little events have been with the American Indian at a lower level. What did I know about developing a bill for a legislation session? Nothing. After speaking with my husband, Larry, we did everything together. We decided we would give it a try. I quickly put a core committee together to work on a bill. I wanted this bill to be written by the Indians for the Indians. Nobody knew how to develop a bill for a legislation session. I was just one step ahead of our committee, researching of what we could work on for the next meeting, but we finally made it happen. At an opening of a major event for the city of Dallas, Larry and I were gathering signatures for our petition. One lady whom I used to work with came by and signed our petition and called her husband over. She told him, you need to help Peggy. He was our state representative. He said his office would be more than happy to help. We quickly got the necessary documentation he asked for, and then we waited and waited and waited. We didn't know what was happening. Representative Lonzo basically told us, chill out. What you have already done for us is all the work that needed to be done. So just wait while we wait for 8 more months. My husband had passed in December. This Texas legislation started in January, and we were on the early docket for public hearing. We even got an offer from a well-known law firm from Washington, D.C. to do the pro bono service for us. I was thinking, what can they do? We've already done all the work and we're ready for the presentation. I was told influencers, and who the firm knows if the Texas legislation is important. Well, our bill passed the House of Representatives with no problem and moved on to the Senate. It passed there too. I had been warned not to get my hopes too high because I might have to do this process a couple of times before it finally got passed. Well, this was going too fast for me. On May 10th, 2013, I received a call from a friend, a chairperson for the Alabama Coshada Indian Reservation, telling me that our bill had been signed by the governor about 30 minutes before the phone call that he placed for me. The 8th annual celebration in the passage of the state law is this coming Friday. And then we always on Saturday, as from our nonprofit organization, do a cultural education seminar for the public. So this year we're doing a Zoom presentation both on Saturday and Sunday. Please join us if you have time. The state law states that the last Friday in September is American Indian Heritage Day and recognition of the historic, cultural and social contributions American Indian communities and leaders have made to this day. American Indian Heritage Day shall be regularly observed by appropriate ceremonies, activities, and programs in the public schools and other places to honor American Indian in this state and to celebrate the rich traditional and contemporary American Indian culture. The mission of our nonprofit organization is to provide awareness, to educate, and to advocate for the American Indian cultural and heritage for both to the native and non-native people. My son, Brian D. Larney, a full-blood American Indian, Choctaw, and citizen of the Seminole Nation, is the chairperson for the nonprofit organization, the American Indian Heritage Day, and also for the Indian Citizen Against Racial Exploitation, which is the advocacy arm of our organization. Brian is a well-known Indian artist in his own right as an outstanding advertising executive. I have turned all over my responsibility of the Heritage Day to Brian, so I get to sit back and enjoy watching the others work. The American Indian Heritage Day addresses all aspects of American Indian culture in Texas, especially since we're the only entity in Texas, and especially in the Dallas area, to address anything in reference to American Indians. Our first initiative is that we've been working on developing a strong community engagement, allies with various community organizations, such as AT&T, and also with their Indian employees, with the Dallas Museum of Art, with the Dallas Arts, with the Dallas Morning News, City of Dallas, Office of Equity, on and on. Our second initiative is the missing and murdered Indigenous women. All the Indians know about this. This is a very important part, but it also happens, and we have a lot of people from our Dallas area that is related to the victims. Our third initiative is Dallas FW Kabucha Luki, Urban Indian Stick Game in Dallas, Texas. If you don't know, Google and learn about it and come learn a little bit more, because we'll have a session on that. And then our last one, of course, is our Indian Citizens Against Racial Exploitation, the sister arms, and some of that is to address the American Indian racist mascots that we have to deal with. We're working with 3 school districts right now to do that. I've had the privilege to lead a campaign for the Dallas Independent School District back in the 1990s, where we eliminated 10 school district logos and mascots. And then we try to address various other negative and offensive remarks in reference to American Indian culture by providing education. Our goal is to be actively present in the racial equity, in the removal of the mascots and of the ethnic studies with the Texas Education Association in the state of Texas, with the Equity Office and state of Dallas, because they don't know anything about redlining. They think redlining just started in the early 60s. I tell redlining started before Christopher Columbus landed in the Caribbean isles, because they started taking our land. So our histories always come back to Indians, even though people don't know that. And then we're also wanting to reclaim the original Caddo tribal name for the Trinity River, which is a major river that runs through Texas, and especially through Dallas landscaping. We want to remove a log cabin which honors the presence of early white settlers in the Dallas land, without mentioning how they had pushed the Indians out of Texas to Oklahoma, and how they stole the land in which they were settling. So let's write the history. We're a grassroots organization. Our major fundraising is the sale of our t-shirts. We get a few very, very small donations, enough to carry us until next year. So please do consider us for the charity contribution. Yokaki, thank you. Pegyarney signing off. Thank you.
Our last featured Teller of the evening is Eldrina Duma, also joining from Texas. Eldrina trained would benefit her tremendously as she began her next journey as a professional storyteller, author, and workshop presenter. Today, she creates stories that stand alone in the midst of all that have been told in the past. Eldrina is a cherished member of Storytellers of New Mexico. Her charity of choice is the Hopi Foundation, which promotes self-sufficiency and self-determination. Please help me welcome Miss Eldrina.
Guatsi, thank you. I appreciate the time that I'm going to have tonight, and I wanted to make sure that I bring honor to the woman that I'm going to be speaking about. She doesn't come from the people that I come from. She comes from up north around the Great Lakes. And I'm going to start off with a simple song that was written by a grandmother and a grandson when they joined in years ago as water walkers. And it speaks, the words that it says, the words that they created are very simple. It's just acknowledging the water. Water, we love you. We thank you. We respect you. And this is their simple song. Nibe gezage higo Kimi kwechawe ni migo Gijawe ni migo Nibe gezage higo Kimi kwechawe ni migo Gizawe Nimigo. In the year 2000, the woman I'm about to introduce you to was at a place of crossroads. She grew up among her people and knew her language fluently. But something had happened to her along with other young children. We heard a few information about this when Jan was talking, but in Canada, they called their boarding schools residential schools. They too had that history of children being taken from their people, from their families, and raised up in these residential schools, and the English language being forced upon them, and their native culture and traditions and language, everything stripped from them. And so when Josephine Damon grew up, she grew up in a society that was already starting to conform to the new way of living. They still did traditional things. They still gathered together. They spoke their language. They did the simple traditions and cultures, but there were some things that they kind of hadn't thought about. And so in the year 2000, when she gathered together with several other members of the Three Fire Society that she was a part of, the Grand Chief there, E. Benton, had spoken to them. He had something very serious on his mind, and he wanted to bring it to their attention. He talked to them about something that had been concerning him for a while. And he said that the water is not being taken care of like it once was. The water is dying. The water is going dry in some places. And he warned them. He had a prophecy that said, if nothing is done, in 30 years, you will be paying for an ounce of water the same amount as you would be paying for an ounce of gold. Well, when Josephine heard that, it just kind of took her breath away. Like, what? We have a lot of water. Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, the rivers. But just the thought of what he was saying, in 30 years, And then she thought to herself, he said a very important word, if nothing is done. So in the back of her mind, she thought, well, what would happen if something is done? Would that then change the course in a good way? It was something for her to think about. And she also said that she didn't think that he meant to, but it almost looked like when he asked the next question, he was looking right at her. She said, I don't think he was meaning to look at me, but it made a difference because he looked and he said, so what are you going to do about it? And that took her back too. And she had to ask herself that question. Well, what am I going to do about it? What can I do about it? Why can't I do something about it? And then she started to think about her whole life. She was born on an island. She was born from the fish clan. Her life was water. She was surrounded by water. She was taught by the women of her people that women are the carriers of water. They can do great things for the water. If they see that the water is dying, they have prayers, tobacco, that they go and they pray and they sing their songs. They carry water in a copper bucket that purifies the water. They can do many things for the water. It's just getting it done. Who will do it? After the meeting, several of the ladies gathered together and they spoke about this and they talked about it. And it was just overwhelming in their minds. What can we do to change the course of this? One spoke up and said, well, maybe we should walk the Great Lakes like Lake Superior. And at that moment, they just all laughed because that was just like Lake Superior. That is a huge lake. No way we can walk around there because at that time she was like in her 60s. But it never left her because she started to see for herself on the water's edge how the water was changing, how the people were abusing the water. She was reminded when she was younger, they had always been told and forewarned that the way that you treat the Mother Earth, if you mistreat the Mother Earth and you pillage from her, you sell her, you tear her up, you abuse her, you mistreat her, the warning was that if you will do that to Mother Earth, then you will do the same to the women of the earth. And that was something that she started to think about alongside with water and the life that it brings. You know, she said, we women, we were in charge of the water because we are all born of water. The man, he plants the seed and it is delivered in a water source and he plants it inside the woman's womb. And for 9 months, that seed is growing in water. And when the baby is born, the water breaks and the baby enters in to this world. We are made of water. And so she got back with the women and she said, you know, I think we should do something about this. I think we should start planning to walk the Great Lakes. We'll start off with Lake Superior. Well, they started planning in the year 2002, and they did their first walk in 2003. She said it was very hard because the people in their area were not very respectful with the indigenous ones. She said when we first started walking, they would throw things at us. There were some times where we couldn't walk on the water's edge. When we could, that was the best thing to do. But she said there were many times that we had to walk on the roadside. And it didn't matter what the elements of the weather was. We put our minds to doing it and we got it done. And at first the people were mean, hateful. They said, get a job. What are you doing out there, you crazy Indians? She said at first it was very hurtful. But then at the end of her water walking time, when she reflected back, in the end, there were more people that joined in with her walking. Over 1,000, she estimated. All those years they joined in and they walked alongside or walked behind the water walkers, because there were some things that had to be done. First, if you joined in with the water walkers, you had to make sure you had the finances and the physical health to do it and take care of it, because they were not going to stop. Once that bucket was filled with water from the beginning of where they started, they did not stop walking until the end of the day, because they carried along an eagle staff. And the eagle staff was a representation of caretaking and protection. But there was a problem there, because usually when the women carry the water in the copper bucket, there's usually a man right alongside of her carrying the eagle staff, taking care of her needs and protecting her. But none were there. She said, we'd look around, where are our men? There was a lady that had a young son that would join us every now and then, but he was young. He did his part though. And she said, we often wondered, where are the men? They are supposed to be standing right alongside of us. Because she said that in their way of thinking, that the women and men, they work side by side. No one takes one step before the other. They stay, when they're walking with the water and blessing the water, they stay right alongside each other. And no one goes in front of them. Everybody that joins in stays behind and walks behind the water walkers. But she said the water always goes forward. There was times that someone had witnessed her as she was walking, and she got tired, and as she rested, what she would do is she would put her water bucket down and rest the staff against something, and she would lay down with her body and her arms outstretched, and she would hug the earth and she would rest. She would feel that earth beneath her, and it would give her strength to get back up and to keep on going. She started her walk in 2003, and her last water walk was in 2017. Josephine Damon was born February 21st in 1942, and I was saddened when I started reading more about her that she passed away last year, February 22nd, 2019. I remembered hearing about her back in 2006. It was between 2004, 2006. I was looking up another person that I was researching from the Anishinaabe people, and I happened to come across her name. And her story fascinated me, but I broke away from that, and I forgot all about her until I was once again focusing back on water. She had a wonderful story. She was a wonderful woman that was sweet and soft-spoken. She walked the Great Lakes, all of them. She said that there was one Great Lake where the people, the indigenous ones, they had residential areas around the lake, and they knew that they were coming. And so they invited the group to come and speak to their meeting that they were going to be having. Josephine, she went ahead and spoke for the group. She got up and told them what their purpose was, that they were going to bless the waters and they were going to check on the waters to see how they were doing. She said that as she was speaking to them and telling them about their journey, she used that time to speak to the men. And she said, "You men, When you plant your seed in us, you don't walk away. You stay with us and you help us raise that seed that you planted in us. As we're walking, where are you? None of you are beside us carrying the eagle staff. We're trying to take the bucket and we're trying to carry the staff all at the same time. That is not our job. We are of water. You are of fire. That is your job, to stand beside us, take care of us and protect us, and carry the eagle staff as we go and take care of the water. And she said some more things in her Anishinaabe language, and then she sat down. She said everything got quiet. Everyone in the room was quiet. All the men that were all sitting up front on the panel, and then the one got up. He repeated everything she said, and he said, "She's right. She's right. We are not doing the job that we are supposed to be doing. Thank you for bringing that to our attention." And she said from that day on, there was a man that came and walked beside them, and they carried the eagle staff. She was very proud of that. Along the way, she taught many people how to pray. She said, this is not just for us, this is for the world. There are many people out there that do not know of the water and that it is of life. And we need to bring that attention to not just our people, but to all over. So she said, when you come and you walk with us and we teach you the prayers, we want you to take it back to your land, no matter where you come from, and you do the same thing too. Water is life. It smells when it's dying. But when you go and you offer your prayers and put tobacco in it, you will see that it starts to move. And if you listen to water closely, it is singing back to you in the rivers, in the lakes. All you have to do is smell it. Look, how clear is it? Water is life, she said. We have to take care of it. We don't want to pay as much for it as we would gold. So what are you going to do about it when you turn that faucet on to take a drink or to take a shower or to take a bath or to give your animals water? Tell them water is sacred. If we don't have it, we don't exist. So let us all be water walkers one time in our life and think about the words that she spoke, not just about water, but what we do to Mother Earth will befall on the women of the earth. Is that happening today? Are we seeing that today? Ni be gezage go kimi kwechowe ni migo gizawe ni migo. Doa, thank you.
This has been a wonderful evening. Not only have we been entertained, but we've been educated and we've learned so much. Let's give all the storytellers another round to say thank you. Thank you. And to Miss Geneva, we honor you. We bless you. Thank you. Thank you. Eldrina, thank you for producing this show. You did a wonderful job, just an awesome job. When I grow up, I want to be just like you.
Thank you, Juba.
All right, and I want to thank the audience for participating tonight and listening to our stories.